everyone, I'm Bia, and welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. For those of you who might not know, Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about Spiritist teachings and topics in a way that makes more sense to us and is more relatable to us as teenagers in today's society. So, we, here at Cardiac Radio, we've been reading through the Spirits book together, question by question, word by word, going through it and trying to understand it to the best of our ability as teenagers, and try and get little lessons from it that we can apply to our day-to-day lives and try and work on that throughout the week, and then continue working on that while we work on other things. Because if we start working on these little things now, these little things will add up to making big progress in our lives. So right now we're in the topic of the law of equality. So last week we started off the law of equality section, and now we'll continue with the section about social inequalities. So question 806. Is the inequality of social conditions a law of nature? So the inequality of social conditions means we're talking about how in societies there's different social statuses, and they're not all the same. There's inequalities. Some have more than others, and it doesn't really seem fair when you look at it. So is this in the law of nature? And the spirits answered, no, it is the work of humankind, not God. So these inequalities that we have in society, they're not because of God. That God didn't force these inequalities upon us. God wasn't like, oh, you have to be like this and you have to be, like, if you're this religion, you're gonna be treated this way, or if you're this color, you're gonna be treated that way. That wasn't God. But that's the way that humankind works. So us as humans, we've created our societies like this to judge certain people or to do certain things. But these inequalities, they're human-made. That's not God who's making these inequalities. But God is aware that, like, people like us, humans, normal humans, just like all of us, are going to make these mistakes and are going to steer society in these directions. And we have to work on helping it progress and changing it, and also meet the challenges that the society is going to face us. But God didn't create the society like this. It's the humans that created these inequalities. And then there's a second part to this question, and it says, will this inequality disappear someday? So eventually, will we stop having this inequality? Like, will everyone actually be equal? Because even in places where, like the United States, where we have equality for all people, even still, sometimes it's not really that equal, or it's just the laws that are equal, but the way people treat one another isn't equal. So eventually, will these inequalities disappear? And the Spirit said, only God's laws are eternal. Don't you see inequalities disappearing little by little every day? These are destined to disappear together with the predominance of pride and selfishness, leaving only the different levels of merit. A day will come when the members of the great family of God's children will no longer regard themselves as being of purer or lesser pure blood, because only the Spirit is pure or less pure, and such does not depend on social position. So, what they're saying here is that only God's laws will last forever. These human laws that we make aren't going to last forever, and we've already seen that. There was, especially when we look at the United States, who we've evolved our inequalities in certain ways. So women before didn't have any rights, and no, we're not at perfect equal rights for women, but we do have those laws in place that women should be treated equally, and we have that. So we're changing that already. And a few years ago, gay marriage could not happen, but now we have that equality in some states and in some places. So we're not at that perfection of that law yet, of course, but we are working on it little by little. And eventually, one day, all of these inequalities will disappear. And that's when we'll be truly practicing God's laws and the right laws. Right now, our human laws are very flawed, but we are changing them little by little. And of course, that in God's eyes, we wouldn't be born and be different based on what social position we're in. We're all different. Yes, we all have unique things, but that doesn't make one of us better than the other. So that's also an important part to keep in mind, that although our society stresses that some people are better than others, even just like celebrities. People think, oh, celebrities, they're famous, they're popular, they have so many things that we don't have, but that doesn't make these celebrities better than we are. Maybe they're better at singing than we are, but not their overall personalities and who they are as individuals. And that doesn't make them worse either. That just makes them different from us. Question 807. What about those who abuse the superiority of their social position by oppressing the weak for their own gain? So now they're asking about those people who they have high power and they kind of push the weaker people down for their own gain. So we can think of like simple cases of this or really dramatic cases of this. So simple case would just be someone like in school who's popular and they bully kids because they want to feel like they're more superior. They want to feel better about themselves, so they bully people who are weaker than them. So that's kind of a simple case that we see in day-to-day, but we can also see this on very extreme cases like Adolf Hitler using his position to really oppress weaker people so that he had more power. So, but if we look at a simple example of someone who has more power oppressing the weak or bullying them or doing something to not be nice just for them to feel better. So the question is asking, what do we do about these types of people? And the spirits answered, they are to be lamented, those wretched beings. They will oppress in their turn and will be reborn into an existence in which they will suffer everything they cause others to suffer. So what they're saying here is those people, they're doing harm for bad reasons, no good reason except for their own personal gain, but eventually this is going to come back to them, and in the next reincarnation, they're going to have to suffer through all these things that they're causing to people. Because it's just like, treat others the way you want to be treated. Well, if you don't treat others nicely, they're not going to treat you nicely either. So even if it's not in this existence, in another existence, this will come back and they will have to repay for all that they've done and all the suffering they cause, and they're going to suffer those same things. And now we're on to the next section of this chapter, which is titled The Inequalities of Wealth. So before we were talking about just in society, but now we're talking about strictly like monetary and wealthy inequalities. Question 808. Doesn't the inequality of wealth originate in the inequality of faculties, which gives to some persons more meanings of acquired things than other persons? So it's saying that because we don't have the same wealth, because we have different amounts of money, that also affects how many things we're open to and how many things we're able to do because we have more money or we have less money. So the spirit said, yes and no. What would you say about fraud and robbery? So here what they're saying is, so doesn't inequality of wealth, so people having different amounts of money, isn't that because we're open to different things? So if one person grew up in a family of shoemakers, maybe they'll just make shoes, which might not be expensive as someone who's in a family of making gold necklaces. So they might just make more money because of what's available to them and what they've learned. But, so they're saying, is it because of this that we have these inequalities? And the spirit said, well, yes and no. Sometimes yes, it's because of what we know and based off what someone else knows and how much experience we're bringing to our job that is causing us to make money. But what about people who steal things? What about robbery? Those people, it's not there just because they could be in the shoemaker family, but they could be robbing and causing that greater wealth. Or they can be even in the gold making family and robbing and then making money. So our wealth doesn't always come from just what is available around us. Sometimes people make wrong choices like robbery. And so then there's a second part to this question, and it says, so would inherited wealth be the fruit of evil passions? So inherited wealth, like wealth that is passed down, like if a family member passes away and you get some wealth that's inherited to you, or just wealth like the gold making family, the gold jewelry making family, they might accumulate more wealth, so they have more wealth to pass down. So is this an evil passion? And the spirit said, what do you know about it? Go back to its origin and find out if it's pure. If you know whether or not, if at its source it was the fruit of spoliation or injustice. But apart from the issue of its impossible evil origins, do you believe that the longing for wealth, even when honestly acquired, and the secret longing conceived to possess it as soon as possible are laudable sentiments? That is what God judges, and I can assure you that the divine judgment is more severe than that of humans. So, what he's saying is, it's not about, okay, if you have more money, it's evil. If you have less money, it's evil. We're not talking about any of that, but it's really about how you handle that. Because if you have a lot of money, but you are generous with it, and you help others, and you don't let it get to your head, then God is judging that. God is judging how you're using that with your wealth, even though you have all this wealth, how you're using that. Or if you have less money, it's also, if God's also judging if you only desire to have more money, or if you're thinking about other valuables instead. So it's more about how you are handling that situation, and how you're handling how much money you have, and how that affects your life and plays a role in your life. And even if you pretend to be happy, or if you pretend to be something, God knows what we're truly thinking and what we're truly feeling. And it's judging that, and that's what's the most important, is how God is seeing how we're interacting with this and making do of this situation. Question 809. If a fortune has been wrongly acquired to start with, are those heirs later responsible for this? So what they're saying is, what if someone, if I steal all this money, and so now my family's wealthy. If I did something really bad, and I got all this money, so now my family's wealthy, and then I pass it on, and so now my grandchildren have all this money that they just got because I passed it down to them, but in reality, I stole it. I wrongly got it. So what happens there? Do my grandchildren now have to pay for this mistake, even though they didn't really make the mistake, it was just passed down to them? And the Spirit said, of course, they are not responsible for the wrong that others committed, especially if they are ignorant of it. But you should know that a fortune is often destined for certain individuals in order to provide them the opportunity to repair an injustice. Happy for them if they comprehend this. If they repair the injustice in the name of the one who has committed it in the first place, the reparation will be taken into account for everyone's concern, because it is almost always the origin wrongdoers who, from the spirit world, inspires them to do it. So, of course they're not going to be completely, to blame. Of course, they didn't cause the situation. Like, let's say here, the grandchildren, they didn't cause the situation. They're not the ones who did it, and they might even not know that this situation even happened. But they still do have that task of how they're going to handle that money, and if they're going to kind of fix what they did wrong without even knowing it. Subconsciously, they fix what they did. They give back some of that money. They use the money for good things instead of bad. So subconsciously, even if they don't know about it, they are going to fix that problem. But of course, they don't take responsibility for doing it. They didn't do it, but they were put in that situation so that they can learn from something from that and fix something from that. So they will learn something, and they are going to fix something, but it doesn't mean that they are taking the blame for it, but they will be there to help the situation and hopefully fix it for the better. Question 810. We may dispose of our assets more equitably or less equitably without breaking the law. Thus, are we responsible for our own testamentary disposition after death? So here they're talking about the different ways in which we can kind of split up our wealth and give our wealth, or donate it, or pass it along, or sell it, or do whatever with our wealth after we pass away. So they're saying, so are we responsible for the way that our stuff gets kind of distributed to others? And the Spirits answered, every action bears its own fruit. The fruit of good deed is sweet, whereas the fruit of other deeds is always bitter. Always bear this in mind. So, even after death, if you are like doing something selfish with all of your things and giving your things for only a selfish reason, or doing something selfish with that money that you have or those things that you have, then that will have a negative consequence. But if you do good things, or and as long as you have good intents and you're doing the right thing, the good thing, something good, then there will be good fruits that come from that, like they're saying here. So always keep in mind that whatever actions we do, if it's a good action, then something good's going to come out of it. If it's a bad action, something bad's going to come out of it, or we're going to have to refix it in some way. So always keep that in mind, that when we're doing things, try and always do something positive, something good. Because then that will be more positive for us as well. Question 811. Is it absolute equality of wealth possible, and has it ever existed? So, absolute equality of wealth, like everyone having the same amount of money, everyone sharing everything, everyone's at the same status of society in terms of wealth. So is it possible, one, and has it ever happened? And the spirits answered, no, it is not possible. The diversity of faculties and characters oppose of it. So no, it's not possible for us to have everyone have the same amount of wealth. That's not possible because of the diversity of what we do, what we have, where we live, and who the people are. So it's not possible. But of course, we should be at a point where no matter how much money everyone has, we can love one another and care for one another and help one another. So we will get to a point where it doesn't matter how much we have, but just because it doesn't matter doesn't mean that we'll all have the same exact amount of wealth. And then there's a second part to this question, and it says, nevertheless, there are those who believe it to be the remedy for all social ills. What do you think of that? So there's some societies, like we learn about communist societies, where they believe that if we eliminate this wealth barrier, so different people having different amounts of wealth, different amounts of money, that if everyone had the same money, the same life practically, then we wouldn't have any of these problems. And that's kind of like what we see in societies like communism, how if we all have the same amount of things and we all share everything, then we won't have these problems. So the question here is asking, so what do you spirits think about this? And the spirits answered, either they are framers of theories, or they are ambitious and envious. They do not understand that equality would be quickly broken by the force of things. Fight selfishness, for that is your social plague. Do not run after chimeras. So what they're saying here is that rather they are making things up, or they're just really ambitious, because as we see even in these communist societies, even though theoretically everyone's supposed to share and have the same thing, there was always those people in power who have more, and those people at the bottom class who had less. So this always comes through, and we're always going to have this divide. But so instead of trying to break that divide, we have to learn how to deal with it and work with it and make the best of it. And if we have a lot of money, help others. And even if we don't have a lot of money, help others still. So we have to work on how we deal in that situation, not about the actual money itself. Question 812. If equality of wealth is not possible, does the same apply to well-being? So, equality of wealth isn't going to be possible. We're not all going to have the same money at one point. But, so does the same apply to well-being? Will we all have the same well-being at one point? And the Spirit said, no. So the same doesn't apply to well-being. But well-being is relative, and everyone who enjoys it if humans understood each other better. For true well-being consists in employing one's time according to one's liking, and not in working at something one does not enjoy. Since everyone has different aptitudes, no useful work should therefore be left undone. Equilibrium exists in everything. Humans are the ones who upset it. So, no, even though we won't have the same amount of wealth, we will have the same amount of well-being. We all will feel good because our wealth doesn't define us, and our wealth doesn't define how good we are. and how like happy we are and how our well-being is. And yes, it's related. The way we live today, it's related, but we can get to a point where it's not related. How no matter how much wealth I have, I can still be happy and I can still have good well-being. And of course, and that's up to us to change not change how much money we have, but change how we deal with that and how we see the situation and make the best of what we have instead of just complaining about what we don't have. So equilibrium does exist in everything. There is that equilibrium, but humans are the ones that mess it up. Humans are the ones that cause the imbalance. But equilibrium is possible. And then there's a second part to this question, and it says, is it possible for everyone to understand one another? So the question's quite straightforward. So, can we all understand each other? And the spirits answered, humans will understand one another when they practice the law of justice. So, we will one day grow to understand everyone, and when we're being just towards all people and kind towards all people, we will learn to understand one another and all live together as brothers and sisters. Question 813. There are persons who fall into deprivation and poverty through their own faults. May society be held responsible for this? So, there's some people who they go into, like, poverty because of their own fault, like their own mistakes. They spend all their money in the wrong places, maybe gambling, or they spent it on illegal things, who knows. So, they fell into poverty, but by their own mistake. So, is it society who is at fault or the person? And the spirit said, yes, so society can be held responsible for this. So yes, we have already told you that society is always the primary cause of such wrongs. Isn't it society's responsibility to attend to the moral education of its members? It is frequently bad education that distorts these persons' judgments instead of stifling their harmful tendencies. So yeah, society does have a role in this because this person didn't just get the idea to gamble on their own, or they didn't get the idea to buy drugs or something like that. It's a society that we live in that, yes, they had the initial thing in them, but society also steered them in that direction because those stuff are in our society, and we can, if a person is drawn to it, it can draw someone and lead someone in the wrong path. So society can distort and change how people's judgments are and what they tend to do in their lives. So society can have effect in how some people, even through their own fault, went to poverty. Society still has a role to play in that. And then we're on to the next section of this chapter, which is titled, The Trials of Wealth and Poverty. So now we're talking about the difference of trials of being wealthy, of having lots of money, and being in poverty. So question 814. Why has God bestowed wealth and power on some and poverty on others? So why do some of us have lots of money and some of us are in really bad, poor conditions? And the Spirit said, in order to test everyone differently. Moreover, as you know, such trials are chosen by the spirits themselves, and they often fail at them. So, we have these differences because we're testing different things. Everyone's at a different stage in their lives, and while someone might need to face the challenge of being in poverty, someone else may need to face the challenge of being wealthy and having lots of money, which, although it might not seem like a challenge, it is a very big challenge to be wealthy as well, because it's about how you spend your money and what you're going to do with that wealth that you have. And of course we're saying, oh, that God put us in these things. But no, the spirits themselves chose. We ourselves, we choose what kind of trials we want to face. So we chose to come in poor conditions, or we chose to come in wealthy conditions and see if we could tackle our challenges that we had to tackle. Question 815. Which of the two trials is more dangerous to humans, poverty or wealth? So which one is trickier to overcome, wealth or poverty? And the Spirit said, "They are equally so. Poverty provokes complaining against providence, whereas wealth leads to all kinds of excesses." So, poverty provokes us to complain about, why is this happening to me? Why am I in this condition? Whereas wealth leads to being exposed to so many different things. Now that you have money, it's like, oh, okay, I can do anything that I want. I can do all these things. But what am I going to do? How am I going to make the best out of the situation? So both poverty and wealth are equally difficult and dangerous trials for us to go through. And so that's where we'll leave off today. And next week we'll finish off talking about equalities between wealth and also between men and women. But before we leave off today, I'd like to read our message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations by Linda Picone for today's date, June 12th. This one's titled, Share Sufferings. When a good man is hurt, all who would be good must suffer with him. Goodness does not exist in isolation. Every act of goodness contributes to the greater good. Similarly, when any act of goodness is delayed or thwarted, we all suffer. Sometimes we see or hear about bad things being done to good people, and we don't do anything because the event seems so far away or disconnected from us. But when a good person is attacked, injured, arrested, jailed, tortured, or killed anywhere in the world, we are all diminished, and we are all a little less safe. What can I do to support good people doing good things wherever they are? Can I send money, join an organization, write a letter of support, or contact a government official? And before we leave off today, I'd just like to remind you all about the first International Youth Spiritist Weekend that we're having July 6th through 8th in Washington, D.C. And you can get more information at cardiacradio.com or emailing me at cardiacradioforteens@gmail.com, and I'll give you all the details for the information for the weekend and how to sign up and all of that. But it's going to be a really fun weekend for all Spiritist teens to come together and do some workshops and talk about topics in our society that are important and how Spiritism can play a role in these topics. And we will also be participating in a charity event on that Sunday in Washington, D.C. So if you all want more information, there's information at cardiacradio.com, or you can email me at cardiacradioforteens@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you right away. I'm Bia, and this has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening. This has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.